Welcome to Just Relationships, the show that offers you concrete ways to make your relationships better. Whether it's your boss, your spouse, your children, or your friends, the quality of your relationships in life directly affects how you feel about yourself and the success you achieve. Your host, Dr. Duffy Spencer, a psychotherapist, telecoach, author, and seminar leader, will interview top experts to help you learn to manage this essential part of your life. And now, here's your host, Dr. Duffy Spencer.
Would you like to get what you want? Do you find that sometimes you don't get what you want? Is it because you haven't asked? Maybe you don't think you deserve it? Or maybe you did ask, but not in the way that people would listen? Would you be willing to put yourself out there and make a case for yourself as well as listen well to other people? If so, stay tuned because I am very pleased to introduce my guest to you, Cindy Watson, who is a social justice attorney and master negotiator. Cindy is an expert on negotiation in many, many facets. How to get what you want from the boardroom to the bedroom. And whether it's a deal on getting a great car or asking for the sex that you want or dealing with the trials and tribulations at work, negotiation is a wonderful tool. And we have an expert here. So, Cindy, tell us about you and how you learned to be such a strong negotiator.
Oh, well, thanks, Duffy. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me. I think it's interesting, and we're in really interesting times now because it seems like we're living in a world of conflict and confrontation today, and it certainly doesn't help that everyone thinks of negotiation as being, all about the bark and the bite and that toughness carries the day. And I think it's because of that there's this myth that women are not effective negotiators because most women tend to shy away from negotiation. And yet when you look at all of the key skill sets that I think mark a really effective negotiator, their assertiveness is one, and that's where I think most people assume that that's what bargaining is all about. But that's only one of 6 key factors. There's also, rapport building and empathy and flexibility, intuition and trustworthiness. And the thing that suddenly struck me is that if you look at those top 6 indicators of a really effective negotiator, 5 out of 6 of those most people would characterize as being feminine traits. Mm-hmm. And having been, a lawyer and as an attorney for 30 years where, everything is about don't leave anything on the table, go for the jugular, that kind of much more masculine approach to negotiation that we see, I think, across the board in, all of our negotiations on the global, international scene or otherwise. And so you kind of, especially as a woman, I think we either tend to shy away from negotiation or we feel the need to overcompensate as a way to succeed. But there's a big price for that. It affects when you're negotiating from a place that's not authentic, and I think for most women, when you overcompensate like that, it affects your relationships with your intimate partner, with your kids. Look at when you go to a hotel and they don't have your room, it's like hide the children, right? You start becoming this different person. And for me, it was like I had a mirror held up one day and I realized I never used to negotiate like that. When I was younger, my natural, authentic negotiation style was all about building rapport and trust and empathy. And that's what sort of preempted me to found Women on Purpose, and I created the Art of Feminine Negotiation, which I think can change the world, frankly.
I agree with you, Cindy Watson, and I think that women are natural leaders because, as you say, we do have these qualities that really do create collaboration rather than conflict. And
Absolutely.
What the world needs is collaboration. So, yeah. And yet you write about how women need to overcome the fear of negotiation by going for the no and to really see themselves as powerful negotiators.
Yeah, and I think the thing that's interesting about that as well is in so many ways women have been conditioned to make themselves smaller, right? To feel a little less than. Like, young boys in kindergarten get their sense of self and their sense of community when they make themselves larger than life and they brag on themselves. And by contrast, studies show that young girls, as early as kindergarten, immediately feel the need to make themselves smaller for fear of being sort of ostracized or shunned. And yet I think some of that sort of generational conditioning that makes us feel a little smaller and less than and resist stepping into our power, the fact that it's changing is, I think, fantastic, because I think that very conditioning that limited us historically is also what's conditioned us to excel and be unstoppable when we do step into our feminine power. Because when you think about it, rapport building and trustworthiness, those are sort of skills we had to develop because we had so few rights. Like, it's a relatively recent history that we were even allowed to own property or that we were recognized as persons in the eyes of the law. And, because we were allowed to vote. So because of that, I think women have had to develop these skills, much stronger rapport building and trust skills, just as a means of surviving. Same with flexibility. This whole idea that behind every great man is a woman meant that we had to really we've always been the managers of success, if you will, and yet in the background while we juggled everything. And even going back to the caveman days, that kind of multitask, we have been bred, frankly, to step into our power, and I think the time is sort of now that there's this rising awareness of that.
That's very well put. I don't know that it is definitely a way to compensate that. You're right. We certainly did not have power in terms of major institutions. I think that females have always had better peripheral vision than men, and the intuitive, the rapport, the connection, taking care of the hearth, taking care of the children, and then what people call feminine wiles, and we've had to develop them, and that's the cultural piece, I think, which is around the sexuality and kind of stooping to conquer, if you will. It's a bastardization of our power, yet what women have learned to do is to capitalize on the source of their power, which is often sexuality, femininity, beauty, youth, that sort of thing, and then been very, very put down for it, ostracized, labeled deviants. How quickly we label women whores and tramps and the sexual epithets that we apply to women.
And I think that's one area where we really need to grow, because I think the one thing that still is holding us back is ourselves. Like, as women, and I think that's starting to change now, and I'm so excited about that, and I'm so passionate about trying to help to be that change, because women have not been great at supporting each other. And I think, there's that scarcity mindset where there's this sense that there's such a little pie to be divided up for us, that we tend to, and again, women are just as bad when you say labeling other women for their sexuality or whatever. And we need to start changing that. And for me, I saw negotiation really, Duffy, as the linchpin, because when you get down to it, all of life is a negotiation. Like, whether it's with your kids or your partner or your boss, if you're an employee, or your employees, if you're a boss, like virtually every transaction we have in so many ways in just living our daily lives, including negotiating with ourselves, probably the most important skill we'll ever learn, and yet we're not taught it.
You're right. We really are not taught it. We're barely taught assertiveness. I actually teach for the American Management Association a seminar called Assertiveness Training for Women in Business. And the course is still offered because it's still something that we have to challenge ourselves to do, to assert ourselves. And females walk a tightrope of acceptability. We can be assertive, but not too assertive. And some people can call it aggressive if we're assertive. And what does that mean? So I think your expertise really fills in that gap, Cindy Watson.
Well, thank you. And the thing is, women don't ask, which is a problem, right? I mean, when you look at study after study, let's take, for example, just when people are given a job offer, 62% of men will negotiate for a higher offer, a higher salary than they're offered, as compared to only 7% of women, which I just find incredible. And even of that sort of rarefied 7%, they ask for less. And it's funny when you say about assertiveness. I have a little tip that I'd like to share with your listeners, and I call it invoking your mama bear, because women tend to step back from that assertiveness, and yet it's when they're advocating for themselves. And yet when women are advocating for someone they care about, whether it is a child or an aging parent or frankly any sort of vulnerable person or group, watch out, because women will bring the mama bear, and they have no problem bringing assertiveness to the table in spades when they're negotiating on behalf of somebody else. So my little tip is for women to just shift their mindset in whatever way works for them. Like some people say, oh, just pretend that you're advocating for somebody else. But I think I'd like to actually have women start to recognize we all have a little bear cub inside of us. And as women, you still carry around those little girl hurts and that little bear cub that still needs to be protected. So the next time you're going into a negotiation for something and you have to advocate on behalf of yourself, just invoke your mama bear on behalf of your own little bear cub. And I think that mindset shift can make a profound difference.
This is wonderful coming from an attorney, Cindy Watson, because I love how you put it. Of course, the mama bear, and I teach people how to self-parent and to be put in that incredible, powerful visual of the little baby cub, and we can be our own mama bear for ourselves. That is so big. That is really, really big, Cindy.
Thank you. I love that.
Yes.
And the other thing I should mention is that for me, like the art of feminine negotiation, I just am so excited when I see women start to recognize that these are skills they use every day. And actually, because I kind of threw them out quickly, so I'll give a quick mnemonic for your listeners as well to make it easier to remember. Those 6 key factors, just think of RFIT, AREFIT. You are fit to be a great negotiator. And the A is assertiveness, R for rapport building, E for empathy, F for flexibility, I for that all-important women's intuition, and T for trustworthiness. And these are skills that, while typically feminine traits, so when women, and you can see the light go on for them when they're like, oh my gosh, I do use those skills every day. So just getting them to bring that with intention when they're negotiating on behalf of themselves is so powerful. But equally, I'd like to see the day when men start stepping into, because we all have feminine and masculine energy, some to a greater or lesser extent. And just imagine how different this world would be, how much less conflict we would have if both men and women were able to step into that kind of feminine energy and have that shift about how let's reframe our concept of negotiation and how powerful that could be.
Beautiful. And the power of reframing. You know, all you have to do is change the frame and the picture itself changes. So to look at it as something that is positive and something, as you say, that is very doable, that is already within our own wheelhouse. So I'm going to repeat your mnemonic, which is brilliant. We are fit, AREFIT, assertiveness, rapport building, empathy, flexibility, intuition, and trust. That is absolutely brilliant, Cindy Watson.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm not going to be able to get through the door.
Well, you know, teaching these concepts for so many years, I'm always looking for new ways to explain them, something that will really hit home, and you're hitting home.
Well, thanks. And I think some people resist because they assume that if they bring that, what they see as more gentler approach, that somehow they'll put themselves at a disadvantage. And I'll tell you, after 30 years of practicing law, if there's one thing I can tell them with certainty, that is that the opposite is true. Because when you negotiate from that place, the simple fact is you get better deals, you get longer lasting deals because you get a better buy-in for those deals, which makes them longer lasting, and you get better relationships, whether on the corporate, from professionally or personally. As I say, from the boardroom to the bedroom, you're going to get better deals with better relationships and longer lasting results. And isn't that what negotiation is supposed to be all about? You can't ask for better than that.
No, you can't. And I'm thinking about in the field of marital conflict and marital therapy that John Gottman and what's her name, his wife, it's just escaped me, but they use the term soft approach, and as you say, men can benefit too. Men can benefit too. There is a concept called androgyny, which is not unisex. It is andro from the male and gyny, G-Y-N-Y, gynecologist, female. And really what it means is the best qualities of each gender. Not to be a walking stereotype, but to be all the best qualities. And studies have also shown that people prefer androgynous managers of either gender. Absolutely. And that we want people who are understanding and relational, yes, that are firm, yes, that are reasonable, yes, that are credible and trustworthy, that make sense, so we can trust that if we follow them, they're not going to throw us under the bus. And wouldn't it be lovely to have real leaders in the world who behave this way? Leaders in the world, on the international scene, leaders in our organizations, that have these qualities of integrity.
Yeah, it would be such a profound shift. And the interesting thing as well is I think when you tap into those, traits, that intuition and that flexibility and that empathy about putting yourself in other people's shoes, which again, as women, we do so well and so often, but it allows you to think outside the box in ways, get away from that binary concept of a negotiation where it's that, we're fighting over what this piece of the pie. I think when you bring these more feminine traits to negotiations, people start thinking outside of that binary construct and then look out, because the solutions that you come up with go beyond what you thought you were negotiating to get not only whether it's a win or lose within your circumstance, but you get results that are better for both parties. It just can be a profound, dramatic shift.
It is so wonderful, and I describe it as 1 + 1 = 3. When you go for the double win rather than I half win, you half win, which is also okay if need be. There's a compromise, yes, and being developmental. What's called developmental style communication is that third option. When you do the brainstorming, that fully satisfies both parties. And I myself have not always been able to do that. I've not always been able to come to a brand new kind of thought. And I don't have to do it alone. Ideally, right, we brainstorm with other people. And the power of the healthy group, where people really are, as you say, creatively thinking outside the box, that there's more likelihood if that you can get to that collaborative third option, if you will, by asking, what do people really, really want? Do I really need a trip to Disney World that requires a plane ride, or do I want a day's entertainment that is more affordable? What is the deep need behind these demands? What I think I want, I don't always necessarily want that per se, but what's the need underneath the entrenchment?
Yeah. I think we have such parallel sort of concepts about this, because I sort of, one of the things that I teach when I'm doing coaching and this sort of workshops and in my Art of Feminine Negotiation sort of programming is the 5 W's, and how we need to start invoking those with intention. And that's, of course, your who, what, where, when, why. But I think in ways that people don't normally think to approach them. And it sounds very much exactly like what you were just saying. Like, really at the beginning, I push for people to try and examine those deeper whys. When you're negotiating for money, it's almost never just about the money. It's about what that money represents for people. Is it? And that's exactly what what you were just saying. Like, does that represent that you can, get your kid a special program that they wanted? Is it a romantic vacation to rekindle a dying relationship? For some people, it's about status or power, or to recognize that to prove that they're enough. So when you tap into what your deeper why is about why you're negotiating, I'm not saying be emotional in your negotiations. I'm saying tap into the emotional resonance that comes from knowing your why, and you will be a more effective negotiator. And similarly, try and anticipate and tap into what the other side's why is, and wow, look out. It totally is a game changer in terms of how you approach your negotiations and what you're able to offer to the other side to get better solutions when you tap into that why.
Yes, and even if people are out of awareness, and unfortunately, Cindy, of course, many people are not very self-aware, and the subconscious is anywhere from 80 to 90% of our psyches, and many people are not aware of their inner drivers and really, really, really what is motivating them. And many people don't necessarily want to know that, because we all have a shadow, and those things that we're not so proud of, not very happy with, that we could reject about ourselves. But to go there, to do that deep dive, I like how you put it, that deeper why, and to know your why. And then it is a game changer if you ask yourself smart questions. And the other person may not have done that, may not want to do that. So there's where empathy, if I were in this person's shoes and what I observe about them, what do I imagine their deeper need is? And even if it's imagination, it still is better than nothing.
Oh, absolutely. Just the exercise of contemplating it is going to make you more effective at the table. And we miss such an opportunity when we don't do that. And the other thing that tied to that I think we're afraid of, that you just touched on, Duffy, is that that vulnerability piece. I think we have been duped into believing that, or because we've been duped into believing that negotiation is all about the toughness, that kind of chest-beating approach, we believe that we shouldn't ever show vulnerability. And in my experience, the opposite is true. So long as you're able to hold your assertiveness and you know what you want and you've done your homework in terms of the technical pieces, like you know what your resistance point is and you know what your best alternative to that negotiation agreement is, allowing yourself to bring a little bit of vulnerability around your why, and sometimes, and knowing intuitively when to share that, can actually have a profound shift on the other side. And in my experience, you're going to get more when you're able to share that. And today especially, we are a society now that is more open to that kind of vulnerability piece, but people aren't bringing it with intention to their negotiations, and I think that's a real missed opportunity.
Interesting, to bring intention to vulnerability, not, oops, I missed a spot, and oops, there's a crack in my armor, right? And I want to credit Brené Brown for that, to really, really uplift and inspire and champion the quality of vulnerability as strength. And because when we look at the word because, why? Because that it is a very powerful word. Because is a word that we can use to influence people. So I like how you put that vulnerability around the why. So I really, really want this because, and then you disclose. You disclose what you're willing to disclose. You allow yourself to soften, and it's so powerful when men can be vulnerable as well. Absolutely. And when you bring intention to it, then you don't need to worry about sort of losing that control, because when you bring those concepts with intention to your negotiations, you maintain control while also having that softness and having that compassion, and also being a compassionate soul for the other person to want to give you what you want, in a way, right? So, and trusting your intuition as well around issues like the where of negotiations and the when of negotiations. Like, as kids, intuitively, we knew that timing was important. You knew not to go to your parents to ask that big ask when they were in a really bad mood.
And somewhere along the line, we kind of lose that art of trusting our intuition. Some conversations need to take place, for example, at the kitchen table. Some can take place in the bedroom, and knowing the where and deciding your when strategically can be really valuable assets as well.
Yes, and I that's well put, that you can use your intuition to be able to figure out, and some people may call that manipulation. You call it strategy, and I really agree, because manipulation can be used for the yay or for the nay, and nobody wants to be manipulated. But we all want to be seen for who and what we are, and where we are, and why we are, and who we are, all of that.
Yeah. And at the end, we all want we want our negotiations to be successful for both parties. So, and it's funny, because I've been asked about that manipulation piece before, and I'm glad you raised it, because to me, I don't see that as a manipulation. What I see that as a strategy to dramatically increase the opportunities for both sides to come away with a really successful negotiation, right? Like approaching your partner about something really important and some big vision for your future while they're in, the third quarter of the Super Bowl is just bad timing. It's not manipulative to wait. It's just smart strategy to wait until a time when you're both more relaxed and open to together create some vision for the future, right?
So you don't have to put yourself down for thinking, am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, or is he or she? And I love this new coinage, hangry.
Yeah.
Have you heard it? I'm angry. I'm angry because I'm hungry, hangry.
Yes, I love that.
Yes, that is really good, and I'm glad you said that, because I do that with my husband, and I realized that when you were saying it, that I have been giving myself a mild put down for waiting at the right time and thinking in advance. How do I say this? What words could be incendiary? What words not incendiary? And yes, this is positive intentionality, and setting someone else up to win, and having the positive win, the double win, as we say.
Absolutely. It's mutually beneficial, so no need to beat ourselves up about bringing that intention to our negotiations. Quite the opposite.
Quite the opposite. So, Cindy Watson, Women on Purpose. Now, how can people get in touch with you, and what do you offer to the public?
Oh, thanks for that. Yeah, I think the easiest way is just to go check out my website. Absolutely. It's womenonpurpose.ca. That's .ca. So womenonpurpose.ca. And I do weekly blogs on negotiation, Duffy. So by all means, check out, every Saturday there's a new blog posted on a new aspect of the art of feminine negotiation. I've got online programs available on the art of feminine negotiation, so people can do it at their leisure. We do live events regularly as well at various locations throughout Canada and the United States for women to come together and get the energy that comes from having a room full of women all sort of tapping into their potential and rediscovering their purpose and passion. And I also do one-on-one coaching or group coaching as well. And I do corporate speaking as well, because this whole idea about negotiation, I think there's a growing awareness now for corporations about the advantage to that.
Beautiful. So Cindy Watson, womenonpurpose.ca. Womenonpurpose.ca. Cindy Watson. Look her up. Look her up. And this is Dr. Duffy Spencer saying goodbye for now and wishing you great relationships.